So today we have a new buffed Barrage build for you all. It's a skill that honestly I had not really found a ton of uses for in terms of viability later on into the game. But with the buffs, I decided to dive back into the skill, theorycraft a little bit more, and I have been really enjoying this build. It's actually not really a ranged build, in my opinion. I really lean towards it being sort of a melee build, but it's still really good. I'm excited to showcase it for you. My voice is still recovering, but that doesn't stop me from making some really fun builds for you all. Let's dive into the skills. As per usual, I will leave a link to the D4 builds version of this build in the description down below. Those of you that want to dive a little bit more in depth to the Paragon, the skills, etc. But starting us off, we are going to be using Puncture and Fundamental Puncture. Everyone knows how much I love this basic skill. It is insane. It gives us guaranteed vulnerable application for our targets. And because we're running a combo point centric build, which we'll go over later on, this is going to be applied everywhere and give us a lot of viability in our build because you need a vulnerable source, and this is going to give us permanent vulnerable for elites and bosses. Barrage is the namesake of this build, obviously, and you'll notice I don't even have a ton of ranks into it because this build is not optimized at all yet. I have been working over it the past day and a half or so. I'm still looking for pieces of gear, so just keep that in mind because this performs really well for not something being, purely optimized for the end game yet. But we're also going to be running into Advanced Barrage. Whenever we cast Barrage and it ricochets, we're going to get some extra critical strike chance. It's going to be really nice. Shadow Step here. We need Shadow Step for a form of CC break. Everyone knows how insane CC is in this game. Shadow Step's going to be there for breaking CC. We're going to reduce the cooldown on it with Disciplined Shadow Step. We're actually going to be running Poison Trap and Dark Shroud. Poison Trap just to kind of trigger some extra crit chance in some aspects later on, or passives later on, and to give us a chance to reset imbuement skills and to give us a little bit more CC. Dark Shroud's not even going to be on our bar. We're actually going to use an aspect to kind of give us free Dark Shrouds with marksman skills. I have not gotten the aspect yet on this character, which is insane to me, but it is really powerful because it actually allows you to use some of the passives and get the bonuses from them despite the skill not even being on your bar, and you getting free aspects of it or free skill triggers of it from your aspects, which is going to be really nice. We're going to be running double imbuement, shadow and poison imbuement. Shadow imbuement mainly to clear out the trash because it's actually a way better single target damage build than it is an AoE damage build, which I will showcase later on. Poison imbuement because it just amps up our poison damage or our damage for single targets so much more with that poison damage. And then we're going to be running some passives here alongside it for some extra energy regeneration, extra critical strike chance on imbued skills, extra damage reduction, etc. Also, a really nice passive that I do want to specifically mention, besides the standard rogue ones, is Frigid Finesse here. We're going to be running Penitent Greaves, which is going to allow us to trigger Frigid Finesse at all times, essentially, which gives us a massive damage increase, which is pretty nice. Also, our key pass is going to be Precision, because we're going to be using marksman skills with our basic and our Barrage here, which is going to give us extra critical strike damage, which is going to be a really nice bonus when we're critting super often. As for aspects, I'm actually going to refer to the D4 builds because as I said, I do not have the Umbrous aspect. So first aspect is the Umbrous aspect. Lucky hit with critical strikes with marksman skills have a chance to grant a free Dark Shroud Shadow. This is going to be really nice to give us extra damage reduction, but also just give us movement speed when we're moving through things, when we do stack up a few of them, which is going to be really nice. Overall, this is going to help our survivability a ton. Aspect of Disobedience and Might, it's basically on every build. I'm just going to skim over those ones. These things are insanely good to increase your survivability. Rapid Aspect, we want to cast our basic a ton because we are using a combo point build, meaning that we want to be able to use that quickly with extra attack speed. Penitent Greaves, allowing ourselves to give a Trail of Frost behind us, giving us the ability to do more damage against shield enemies and proccing our Frigid Finesse. Edge Master's aspect, because we are running a combo point build, we're going to have high resource almost always, allowing us to get maximum benefit from the specialization and also maximum benefit from our core skills with the other weapon that we'll be using to kind of reaffirm our combo point value here, which is Condemnation. These two in conjunction with each other have very, very good synergy because we want to get to that 3 combo points. It's going to deal extra damage. And then because we're generating combo points, we're generating energy, which is going to give us more energy for Edgemaster's aspect, which is going to just do a ton of damage when we trigger that barrage with 3 skill points. Edgemasters is the one on the 2-handed ranged weapon because this is going to give us a ton of additional damage, more so than any other aspect besides potentially aspect of corruption, which is going to be on our amulet. But if you want to go for more of a poison-centric focus, then you can absolutely change these two around. Aspect of the expectant, whenever we attack with a basic skill, we're going to increase our core skill damage. Again, we're casting our basic because of our specialization, so we get extra value there. Aspect of branching volleys, giving our barrage additional chance to split into 2 areas whenever we ricochet, giving us additional value in terms of AoE value, but also just overall extra damage. And lastly, aspect of bursting venoms. This one only really matters on bosses, and even then you have some other options to slot it out with. For example, I personally found that accelerating aspect can work a little bit better in some situations for extra attack speed, so I would not blame you if you wanted to go with that one. One thing I do want to mention before we dive into anything else is condemnation once again, because in a previous video I did not specify this, but I want to specify this here. In order to get the chance to generate 3 combo points, you have to attack with a dagger. Now, when you're using the puncture, you're actually going to be attacking with the dagger. So this does actually have a chance to generate those 3 combo points. So you do have to pay attention to this very closely because you might want to, cast Barrage a little bit more often than you might think otherwise. As for gems, we're going to be running Topaz on the armor, Emerald on the weapons, and Skulls in the jewelry. This is pretty standard for basically 90% of builds out there. Emeralds, because we want the extra critical strike damage against vulnerable enemies. We have permanent vulnerable between Shadow Imbuement, basic attack, and our glyphs. Topaz, in this build, we actually do have a chance to get CC'd pretty easily with only 1 charge of Shadow Step and no ability to reduce its cooldown besides its modifier itself. So oftentimes I like to run the Topaz because you'll see later on when I showcase it, it's very likely for me to get CC'd, that these Topazes really do come in handy. And then Skulls in the jewelry because it's the best way to reduce our damage taken overall. So pretty self-explanatory for anyone that's gone over any other build in basically the entire game right now. Some stats you're going to want to consider when you're going through this build. For armor, you're just going to want to look for in the helmet a little bit of cooldown reduction, poison imbuement, that type of stuff is going to be really powerful. For your chest piece and your pants, you're going to want to look for total armor, damage reduction to close enemies. You're going to be playing this, as I said, as a melee build 90% of the time. So close damage reduction is going to be far more important, and you can see here these pieces are not nearly what I would like them to be. I have the close damage reduction, but these pants are honestly pretty mediocre. I just swapped them on because I wanted to save my other aspect on my other pants for a different build, so I'm working on it, but you can just see how kind of mediocre my gear actually is right now for this build. For gloves, you're looking for that critical strike chance, you're looking for attack speed, you're looking for ranks to barrage. Obviously, that's our skill. Ranks to twisting blades does absolutely nothing for us here. For jewelry, we're going to look for critical strike chance, critical strike damage. For our amulet, energy cost reduction is always going to be super useful, and things like imbuement skills, extra passives that are really important, like weapon mastery, malice, are very good upgrades on the amulet as well. And then for the weapons, one thing I really want to mention is that you do kind of want to lean towards going for daggers because it is going to increase our attack speed for our basic attack, but also it gives us close damage, which is going to be pretty good as well. And then for our actual ranged weapon, we want to lean towards crossbow for the extra vulnerable damage because the bow is going to give us distant damage in the inherent stat, which is pretty trash for this build. So those are the stats you're going to want to focus on. Obviously, there's so many other stats that I could talk about, but in general, that's going to be kind of the focus. Again, if you want to look for the full build, then it's going to be in the D4 builds. Now let's talk about specialization and Paragon. I figured I'd talk about these together because there's a lot of things in the Paragon board that only work with the specialization. So we're running combo points. Basic skills now generate combo points, and core skills consume those combo points. So for Barrage, it's going to give you additional arrows and additional damage. The damage skyrockets, and the amount of arrows that you're going to be shooting also skyrockets, which is pretty important. So keep that in mind. And this is just going to give you kind of your rotation where you're going to be basic into core skill, and then this is going to really synergize with all those other aspects that we're running to give that one hit of our core skill just absolutely amazing damage. And oftentimes you will have basically permanent energy if you follow this rotation, but also you can start to spam a little bit on bosses when you do have a couple of imbuements up, so that's not really too bad of an idea. As for Paragon board, I'm only going to talk about the main boards and the specific glyphs. If you want to see a full breakdown, once again, it's in the description down below, but we're going to be running the combat glyph in our starter board. This is insane. We're going to get extra restoration of energy costs, as well as core skill critical strike damage increasing. This is a massive glyph, arguably one of the most important ones. Next one, probably the most important one in this board, or in the game in general, is Exploit. This is going to give us extra damage against vulnerable targets, and whenever we damage an enemy, we're going to have a chance for them, or they're going to become vulnerable rather, for 3 seconds. So this is going to give us basically permanent vulnerable on an AoE for any trash mob, especially when we go ahead and let's say we have Shadow Imbuement that procs, or we Barrage and it ricochets outwards or whatever. Between Shadow Imbuement, between this, we're going to have permanent vulnerable because it's just going to be basically apply vulnerable, explode, apply vulnerable, explode, etc., etc. Which is going to be really strong. Next one is going to be the control glyph, which is going to give us extra damage against chill targets and additional damage against crowd control targets, which works against chill enemies, which is going to just give us a ton of extra damage. Also, this next board was the cutting stratagem board, where we're going to be running the legendary node cutting stratagem, because this is going to give us extra arrows out of our Barrage, which is really nice. Then for this one, it's Eldritch Bounty, and we're going to be running down for Eldritch Bounty to give us extra damage for that imbuements element, and also picking up some of the rare nodes down here. But next board is going to be the Tricks of the Trade board, picking up the Ranger glyph. We're going to be using a ranged weapon most frequently in a lot of our jumping in scenarios, because we'll be basic, jump into the fight, then Barrage. So that's when the damage reduction really counts. But also more importantly, actually, is the damage from marksman skills, which is going to work with our Barrage. Next and final board is going to be the No Witnesses board, and we're going to be running the Turf glyph because we want additional damage to close enemies and also damage reduction against close enemies. I much prefer a lot more survivability. If you want to push higher tier nightmare dungeons, you're going to need it, and this is just going to give you that little bit more of survivability. Also, just giving us a lot of extra damage, so it's going to be really nice. That's going to be the specialization and Paragon board. Let's dive into actually showcasing the build. So here we are in a tier 49, which is pretty solid, but it is something to consider. We're not doing like a tier 60 like I was doing with my Poison Imbuement Rogue, or even like Death Trap. Tier 60s are extremely easy with those builds, but I have not fully optimized this build. This is just sort of me transitioning into the build and getting a baseline ready, and I wanted to show you that here. Again, because we have Condemnation, because we are going to be focusing on combo points, and because we have the imbuements, we're going to play a more slower style, especially since, well, we don't have as many CC breaks and the ability to kind of regenerate those. But just to show you all here what we got going on, we've got to start this out by getting in there with a triple combo point blast with the Barrage. And you can see the damage on this is very solid. We took that one out in almost one shot, and that's pretty consistent with what we could do. You can see here, that was a Shadow Imbuement on the Elite there. And when you do have Shadow Imbuement, you can easily clear out packs. You don't really want to linger around when you don't have an Imbuement ready, because it does take a long time to kill a lot of things, especially without Shadow Imbuement. You can start spamming a little bit to clear out everyone when you just have standard monsters around. But generally speaking, you want to play around your Imbuements. That's how oftentimes any rogue build will work. is try to scale with the imbuements and the extra crit chance you're going to get from that. Also, as something that I realized while playing a little bit more Barrage, the key to get a lot of damage out of this potential skill here is to play it like a melee build, which is kind of awkward, you could say, because, well, a lot of people want a ranged rogue, and even the ranged builds are still being played as melee builds, which, you know, is, I guess, disappointing in a way, but it is what it is. It is a lot better when you do play as a sort of shotgun in your face, and that is something that, well, I was trying not to, as it was supposed to be sort of a ranged build. And to be honest, I kind of view this as I said earlier, a melee build, because you're just kind of in people's faces regardless. You can still play it as a ranged build. You're just going to be way less effective at it. But we'll go ahead and continue on with this Nightmare Dungeon. You can see it's pretty simple. I haven't really been super close to death, except for the fact that, well, when you get CC'd, which is one of the reasons, or the main reason, why every build runs Shadow Step, right? That is the key CC break on the rogue. And you can see with these cold enchanted units, it becomes very, very tricky a lot of the times to stay alive. But once we do stop getting CC'd for a second, it becomes a lot easier. And just to show you all here, if I were to go ahead and try to kill this tree here, the damage is not very impressive, even if I stand out on the outer edge. If I go close, though, you'll notice the damage immediately starts to go way, way higher. Once I build up that combo point, I was basically able to do about 60% of that boss's HP or elite HP with one hit due to me being just closer to the enemy. I'll go ahead and skip ahead to the boss so you guys can see what that looks like right in a second here. So here we are at the boss fight, and I'll just show you the damage potential of this build. I mean, check this out. We really want to scale those 3 combo points. You can see that first hit almost did about 50% of the boss's HP, and then you can see I missed the shots there. But you can see the burst damage on this build is very impressive for single target damage, which is something that I generally lean towards in 99% of my builds, because AoE damage can be fixed by things like Shadow Imbuement. It can be fixed by things like just skipping the packs of monsters, especially if you're just looking to upgrade glyphs or min-max your builds, or just look for loot, etc. Obviously, if you're XP grinding, you're gonna want to take Shadow Imbuement for that. And overall, if you're just looking to kind of push or just do higher tier content, this Shadow Imbuement is gonna really help. But the single target damage with Poison Imbuement is insane on this build. And honestly, I could see this being the new meta once I start to finalize this build. The recent patch did buff Barrage by about 10% base damage, which is pretty significant. But then also, I have 5 ranks in a Barrage right now. I have no additional on my gloves. I have not nearly like maxed out stats, not nearly like maxed out aspects here, because I do not have the proper aspects for the build. Specifically the Umbrous aspect, and I'm missing a couple of the ones that you have to find because I had already placed them on other pieces of gear. So yeah, this is still a work in progress, and the amount of damage that I'm already pumping out and the amount of viability this build has already is insane. I can absolutely see this being the next meta, especially if they continue to buff things like Barrage in the future. We could see this being absolutely the clear-cut meta. So pretty excited about this, guys. I'm going to continue to refine this build, and I might do an update later on talking about the completed version. Let me know if you guys want to see a rapid fire or flurry build next in the comment section down below. If you liked, please like the video. Again, pardon for my voice, but it's been a few days, and well, I can't stay away from the game any longer, so I have a video for you today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.